They followed him across deserts and mountains, through starvation, disease, and the blades of their enemies. They believed he was chosen by God, anointed not just to lead, but to conquer. He was their king, their general, their symbol of holy vengeance. But he betrayed them, and when the time came, he killed them himself. This is not a tale of enemy treachery or battlefield confusion. This is the dark, brutal truth behind one of the most respected kings of the Crusades. A king who turned his sword not just on the infidels, but on his own men. You won't find this in many school books, and you won't hear it sung by bards or scribes, because the story you're about to hear was buried beneath centuries of myth, for good reason. His name was Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor. To some, he was the Antichrist. To others, a genius, a philosopher king, the man who dared to challenge the church and speak Arabic more fluently than Latin. But during the Sixth Crusade, Frederick did something no other Crusader king had done. He took Jerusalem without spilling a drop of Christian blood. And then he did the unthinkable. But to understand what drove a king to kill his own followers, we have to go back to the bitter power struggles that tore Europe apart. The year was 1227. The Pope, Gregory IX, had called yet another crusade. The Holy Land had changed hands too many times. Frederick, ruler of vast lands from Sicily to Germany, had vowed to lead the mission. But he delayed, once then twice. Illness, weather, excuses. The Pope excommunicated him. No one dared defy the church, but Frederick did. In 1228, under the weight of excommunication, he sailed to the Holy Land anyway, a crusader who wasn't even allowed to take communion. This wasn't a march of glory. It was a shadowed campaign. Many knights refused to follow him. Others questioned his right to lead. The Crusader states themselves were divided. Templars, Hospitallers, and local nobles had their own agendas. And yet, Frederick did what none of them expected. He negotiated with the Sultan of Egypt. While others fought, Frederick spoke. Where swords clashed, he offered gold and treaties. And in February 1229, without a single battle, he entered Jerusalem. Not as a conqueror, but as a diplomat. He crowned himself in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. No pope present, no blessing, just him, his men, and the silence of suspicion. To the church, this was blasphemy. To the militant orders, this was cowardice. But to Frederick, it was victory. He had reclaimed the holiest city in Christendom. Without war, without bloodshed. But this is where the story turns dark. Because not all Crusaders accepted this peaceful triumph. Many of his own men, especially the Templars and local lords, accused him of treason. They whispered that he had consorted with the enemy, that his diplomacy was a cover for betrayal. And soon, they rose against him. In a twisted irony, the holy city Frederick had returned to Christian hands, became the setting for a war between Christians themselves. But Frederick had no intention of losing. He struck first. With brutal force, he turned on those who had doubted him. He ordered the arrest, and in some cases, the execution of his own Crusader commanders. He declared them traitors to his authority, publicly humiliated them, stripped them of land, titles, and sometimes their lives. One account describes how knights were dragged from the altars they had sought refuge upon, cut down in sacred places, by order of the man who claimed to restore holiness. Jerusalem had been saved, yes, but Christian blood soaked its stones, spilled not by Muslim hands, but by a Christian king. The papal envoys wrote furiously back to Rome. Frederick, already excommunicated, was now a murderer of Christians, a tyrant cloaked in piety. He was cursed in sermons, declared unfit to rule. But in the East, his power grew. The locals, Muslims and Christians alike, respected his intelligence, even if they feared his cruelty. Frederick began writing letters in Arabic. He debated theology with Muslim scholars. He questioned the infallibility of the Pope. And yet, back in Europe, his name became a threat whispered in monasteries. Not just for what he had done, but for what he symbolized. A Crusader king who refused the Pope, who reclaimed Jerusalem through negotiation, who killed his own knights for questioning his methods, who preferred peace with Muslims over obedience to the church. Was he a villain? a visionary, or something far more dangerous? Perhaps Frederick understood something the others did not. That the Crusades were not a war between good and evil, but between men and their ambitions. He did not see the world in black and white, but in shades of survival. And in that world, loyalty was not sacred. It was expendable, even if it meant executing the very men who had fought to follow him. This is why Frederick's story is rarely told, because it doesn't fit the legend, because the image of the Holy Crusader King cannot include political assassinations, broken oaths, and public executions of fellow Christians. Because peace won through diplomacy is harder to glorify than victory won by the sword. And because sometimes the darkest betrayals in history don't come from the enemy, they come from the king you swore to serve. So the next time you hear the tales of Crusader glory, remember that one of them took Jerusalem without a fight, and then turned that peace into blood, not because he had to, but because his throne depended on it. And now that you know, ask yourself, was he a savior, or just another king who killed to protect his crown?